Hello, hello. So, this week, patch 3.1 dropped, and with it, a new batch of regiments of renown for all the Game 3 factions. So, we're going to be taking a quick look at them, and then ranking them. This, as per usual, is going to be focused mostly on domination mode, though it may have some application in land battles or campaign as well. So, let's get started. First off, we have the Slanesh Spear ROR, which is the Princes of Perfection. They get Perfect Vigor, So Perfect Musk, and Expert Charge Defense, which are all great things to have on a frontline spear unit. So Perfect Musk just increases their killing power as well as their survivability in the front line. Perfect Vigor helps them just keep fighting longer, and Expert Charge Defense helps them trade better into infantry as long as they're braced. So all in all, it's just a straight upgrade over the basic Devoted Marauders for 500, which you would hope it would be for that much of a price increase. But honestly, for the price, it's a very solid frontline durable spear unit, which is something that Slanesh didn't really have. Their basic spears are pretty flimsy, so having a bit more of a tanky frontline is definitely a plus. Talking about tier list, I'd say they're definitely a solid A. It's a good unit, doesn't really change how Slanesh plays fundamentally, but it definitely helps them. Next we have the Cathay ROR. I believe it's the Bandits of the Silver Road? Bandits? Yes, I got that right. Bandits of the Silver Road. The Peasant Archer ROR. So they are quite a bit more expensive than the base variant. For an extra 225 gold, you get, what is it? Flammable imbuement, fire damage, shields, and Vanguard deployment, and Woodsman. Woodsman isn't super relevant. Vanguard deployment is kind of nice. Cathay has very, very few Vanguard options, so it does give you that better later in the game summon, as well as a little more independence for your archer unit. Shields as well help it trade into other archer units, but you never really struggled with that as Cathay. If you're having an archer shootout, you really would probably just go for Jade Warrior crossbows rather than these guys. But the Flame Imbuement is actually pretty neat. High Elves have a similar archer unit to this, the Talons of Torquelda, where they imbue fire weakness and deal fire damage, which actually makes them have a very, very substantially increased damage output. So these guys will actually hit really, really hard, even compared to Jade Warrior crossbows, who have a little more missile strength in them. Because of the fire weakness and the extra models, they will hit harder than any of your other archer units, short of Celestial Dragon crossbowmen. But they are still pretty flimsy, so overall, they're kind of a weird niche. They hit pretty hard, but they're not nearly as durable or as safe as your other crossbowmen. So, on the tier list, I'll have to put them at a B. They're okay, they hit pretty hard, they have their role, but oftentimes they're going to be overshadowed, I think. Next, we have the Fleshhound ROR, which is the Khorne. We got Hounds of the Blood Hunt. So, these guys have rank 9 combat stats, which are phenomenal. Dampen, the ability to remove magical attacks and spell resistance. Removing spell resistance is completely useless when you're playing as Khorne, because obviously you don't have spells. And they also have Gore Feast, which gives them healing in melee, which is huge. For 1,000 gold, these guys are kind of incredible. Removing magic attacks means that their Fizz resist will affect everything they fight, which makes them 20% tankier, on top of the healing they have and the extra melee stats. These guys are just going to tear apart wherever they fight. It seems like an incredibly strong unit, bringing back some of that Fleshhound dominance we saw before 3.0 came out, where Fleshhounds were just tearing apart everything. That's kind of what I expect out of these guys, although these guys are going to be even harder to kill, because they have that healing, they have that dampen. They also have immune to contact effects, which is nice. If you're fighting something with poison, you're fighting Nurgle or Lizardman, or poison, it'll help a little bit. Keep the damage up, but yeah. They just seem like a solid mobility linebacker kind of unit. I'm going to put those guys right up in A tier again. A nice, solid all-rounder mobility unit. For Kislev, we have the Watchman in the Night. The Armored Kossar ROR. So these guys trade in their pistols for an extra sword. They are a dual-wielding melee infantry unit, which is something that is very useful for Kislev, because now they have another frontline infantry unit that doesn't count against your missile cap, which in and of itself is very, very useful. On top of that, they have Frostbite, they have bonus versus infantry of only 5, which is fine. Their stats are quite good. They don't rely on that bonus versus infantry a ton. Their stats are very, very good. They also have Rabble Rouse and Frenzy. Frenzy actually increases their damage output quite considerably. It brings it up to about 60 melee attack against infantry, which is incredible. Rabble Rouse is a bit of an odd one. First of all, the range isn't huge at 35 meters. It gives ITP, which is always a little bit weird with Kislev because of the way the Kislev's passive work, the way By Our Blood works. It helps against fear, but against Terror, Terror and Dire Blood have a weird interaction where Terror procs earlier than Dire Blood. Terror procs at 12 or 13 leadership, where Dire Blood procs at 0, so you can have this passive go off after you've Terror routed, which means that you'll be unbreakable while you're routing, which is really, really unfortunate, and really can hurt your front line as Kislev. So having that ITP is actually pretty beneficial to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. Now, it's not super reliable because of the way leadership can tank very quickly, but when that does happen, it's crippling, and so having that ITP in your front line to keep them fighting just a little bit longer, to make sure the passive goes off, make them last even longer, can be very, very impactful. So I really like these guys. I think they're a really solid addition to Kislev's roster, and like I said, they don't eat into your missile cap. They're an aggressive melee infantry unit that you didn't really have before, short of Zargard. They are pretty expensive, but I think they're well worth it. I think these guys belong all the way up here in the S tier because they really helped solve one of Kislev's big problems, which is their missile unit cap and their lack of aggressive infantry. And then they have some nice abilities to go along with it. So I'm going to put them in S tier for now. Next, we have the Ogre ROR, which is a Nobbler Trapper called, what's it called? The Bogglers of the Mad Marshes. So these guys have poison, rank 9 stats, and this ability right here, Water Birth, which gives them regeneration and restores models when they're in water. The big problem with this ability is that most tournament maps don't have water as a feature. There's very, very few that actually use water, so this ability will almost never proc. That said, for 150 for a triple gold Chevron Nobblar, that's pretty good value. Nobblar Trappers are something that gets Chevroned quite often. It's very popular among Ogre players to triple gold Chevron Nobblar Trappers to give you a bit more of a solid front line as well as the missile attacks. And not only are these guys cheaper, they also provide poison, increasing their durability even further. And with the Nobblar Trapper buffs this patch, where they got bonus versus infantry, they seem like a really compelling option just in general, in spite of the lack of usefulness of their ability. That said, they do lose Nobblar Traps, but this ability was kind of janky and not super reliable anyway. So the extra stats means these guys are actually pretty worthwhile, I'd say. I'd put them up in A tier again. A lot of solid RORs this patch. On to Tzeentch. We have the Chromatic Abominations. So these guys have bronze shields. They have a 360 missile block, which means their bronze shields apply no matter where they're getting shot from, which is a new mechanic that hasn't been in the game before, which is neat. They have 4 times the ammo of basic blue horrors. They have 16 shots, and they have this ability right here, Barrier Boost. Every time a spell is active, that means once it's been cast to the time its effect ceases. So if it's a buff that lasts for 30 seconds, this is active for those entire 30 seconds. If it's a blue fire that lasts for 3 seconds, then you fire it, hits the target, that's its duration. It only lasts 3 seconds. So if you're using things like Harmonic Convergence or Regrowth with Kairos, then this can actually have a pretty substantial uptime and give you a lot of healing. Well, healing. The problem there is that this isn't a melee unit. If this effect was on a Chaos Warrior or the Severed Claw, it would be god tier. Like, it'd be incredible. But because it's on a fairly squishy ranged unit, it doesn't give nearly as much value. Now, granted, horrors have better barriers than Chaos Warriors, but they're still very squishy, and they don't want to be in a situation where they're taking damage in the first place. They're a ranged unit. They want to be sitting back and shooting, especially since they have all that extra ammo and missile strength. So you really want them to be sitting and shooting, which means they won't get that much value out of that ability. And back to the ammo thing, like, they have 16 ammo, but for a 90 range unit that's pretty squishy and not that quick, they're going to have a very hard time spending that ammo. So for 750, I feel like you're most of the time just going to be better off with a pink ore for 700 than you are taking these guys. They're pretty durable thanks to the ability, but their melee stats aren't even there to make up for it. Like, their melee stats are still not great, so I'm really not a fan of it. I'm going to put these guys down here in C tier. I really am underwhelmed by them. They seem like they want to try to do a lot of different things at once, and they can't really pull off all those things, and it doesn't feel that good to me. And last but not least, we have the Nergs. We have the Frolickers Bubonic, the ROR Nurgling. In addition to their rank 9 stats, they have this ability right here, Blisterback. 10 melee damage reflection and 8 leadership while in melee permanently. for the price of losing Cloud of Flies, which gives 9 melee defense. Now, their chevrons do make up for most of the missing melee defense, as they do still have 31 melee defense in melee, as opposed to the Nurglings, which will have 33 with that ability popped. So they aren't losing on their defensive stats a whole lot. And they do gain quite a bit of melee attack. This ability is... The leadership is really nice. Nurglings have... All demons have a problem where they crumble away pretty quickly, so having the extra leadership to keep them in the battle for longer is really, really nice. The melee damage reflection is kind of niche. What it's really good at is fighting low weapon strength units, because it's a flat damage value, the damage reflection. So against things with high weapon strength, your elite infantry, your cavalry, that's not going to do a whole lot. But against a unit that's only doing 20 damage on a hit, this can actually reflect a large portion of their damage and help them trade very, very effectively into chaff units. Your marauders, your bleak swords, your state troops, that kind of thing. I've tested them a bit. They're performing quite a bit better than the basic Nurglings. Whether they're worth 550, I'm not entirely sold yet, but they're definitely one I will be keeping my eye on as times go forward. Rating them feels a little hard. I feel like I need to test them out a little bit more, so for now I'm just going to put them in B. But it does give Nurgle a little bit of a more durable Vanguard quick frontline, which could be kind of neat, going for some more aggressive Nurgle mobility kind of styles. We'll just have to see and wait and see how that one plays out. But that is all the new RORs. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.